Good morning, YouTube. It's 10 a.m. in the great state of Texas. And what are we doing today? We're trying to figure out what to do with all this leftover epoxy that I have around the shop. So I work a lot with epoxy. Most of my projects involve epoxy in some sort of way. And when you do a bunch of projects like I do, you accumulate epoxy bottles. And sometimes you don't get to use all of the resin and epoxy that's remaining in some of these 2-gallon jugs. So they accumulate because you have to get new epoxy to have enough to do some particular projects. So all we're doing here today is taking all 6 of these bottles, pouring them out, and we are going to do an epoxy project, a plain Jane bowl. We haven't done one of those in a while, and we're going to just get something cool out of it because we don't want to waste all this epoxy. So these come in 1-to-1 jugs, so all we're doing is putting them upside down, getting them stirred in real good. Problem is, some of them are newer than others, so there's a lot of yellowing that kind of goes with the epoxy. So I just picked up whatever black diamond pigment this is. I think this was like some type of green, obviously, and I think we're going to throw some glitter in there too. Just trying to do a different colored bowl project. And why not throw in some black glitter just to give it a little bit of character. And I think this is about 48 ounces total that we got into this one. And then we're using a mold release for the first time. If you went back and saw my product review, I got this off of another wood turner on YouTube, Pole Barn Productions. He uses this and it seems to work pretty good because I need to start saving some of these containers because they're not cheap. And I need to stop throwing so much stuff away a lot of the time. But got everything mixed up, took all of that epoxy and poured it into this one, and we're just going to see if we can get everything out on the first try. So got the pressure pot going, hooked that up, and now we're just going to put this into the pressure pot for about 4.5 hours and let the resin cure for a couple of days before we end up turning it. So 4.5 hours later, came back, took it out of the pressure pot. Mold release didn't work exactly how I wanted it to. Had to give this thing a couple of thuds, come back, hit it with the air hose just to try to get everything out. And you can see it's kind of, detaching there a little bit, but not obviously as easy. So I had to go to the floor and then pop that thing out, and it had this like weird, sticky little slimy film across it. But this is what it looks like 4.5 hours later. I also added some blue apparently somewhere in the mixing process, but it looks kind of cool. I'm just like, I'm not too excited about it, so we're just going to put a waste block on there, get that glued down, and then we're going to start turning it onto the lathe like we usually will do. And just like everything else that I usually do in all my woodworking projects, there's going to be problems. In spite of almost doing this for 5 years now, I am just encountering problems sporadically, and this project was no different. So we're getting the faceplate on there, and this cheap wood that I picked up from Lowe's is just cracking, just not doing anything that I wanted to. So had to take that faceplate off and come back and get a different faceplate or a waste block or whatever and put the faceplate on there, put a copious amount of glue on there, press that down real nice and neat, work the edges again, and I'm going to try to put the faceplate on there yet again. So this is take 2 of trying to do this very simple part of the bowl making process. So cracked again, but I'm like, all right, cool, I've had that happen before. Just pump it full of hot glue, get those spaces and cracks done, and just put it right back on the lathe. And let's just see what happens, because woodworking is an adventure, and this bowl was definitely one of those. So we let the epoxy set up for like over a week. So the epoxy was good. Usually what happens a lot of the time when I have like different mixtures of different resins, even though they're the same brand, I get a lot of chip out a lot of the time. And that was kind of my fear with this one a little bit because of all the different epoxies that we had used. But initially, not a whole lot of issues here. You can see that we're getting some really good ribbons off of there. The epoxy is working down real good. We're just making a nice round cylinder shape. But just like everything else, had some chip out on the bottom. So at this point, I'm like, okay, just more problems with this project. So I'm thinking, okay, just take your time, work it out, work the problem, don't get aggravated, because I tend to get aggravated a lot of the time when I'm doing some of these projects when they don't immediately go the way that I envisioned. So came back, small, simple little strokes, just working that chip out, and it went pretty well. Not a whole lot of issues there. Once we got the chip out figured out, then I just came back and was just doing small strokes, layer by layer, piece by piece, not being too aggressive with the chisels, stopping, starting the lathe to make sure that it was the way that we wanted it to. And this part went really good. You can see here, nice even color on the blank itself, so that's how you know you're doing pretty good here. But now we're just stopping to feel the lathe, or feeling the blank out, just feeling how smooth it is, because sometimes you'll get like divots and crevasses in there and it's not exactly how you envisioned it. But once we got to a nice cool little depth that we like, or cool shape I was happy with, then we just came back and started to make the mortise. And if you guys went and watched my YouTube shorts, you guys already know what's coming. But this one, just more problems, and I'm just, boom, pops off the damn lathe. And I'm like, alright, cool, just another problem. So what ended up happening was nothing attached. I'm assuming the glue just was too hot and just didn't adhere the way I envisioned. And I was like, alright, so another problem to fix. Work the problem. So we got this all taken off, and now all we're going to do is directly attach the faceplate to the blank itself. And usually, I have actually never done this technique. Usually I've always used the waste block, but this time I just went straight to it, and I was like, alright, well, we've already had enough problems with this project, what's one more? So got that in there, and every time you reset that faceplate, there's going to be some problems. There's going to be some wobble because it's not even, because the center balance is not the same place. So I had to come back, take off more material, make sure everything is nice and even and balanced before we started to make the mortise again. And surprisingly, we centered it pretty accurately. It didn't take too long to get that part figured out. And now we're just coming back, and I'm literally rushing to make this mortise because I'm concerned that it's going to pop off the lathe yet again. But this part went relatively easy. Not a whole lot of problems with this part of it. Most of the problems with the project are already kind of done, and then we're just sizing everything up for the chuck so we can get this reversed. Once we got that, then we just went a little bit deeper in depth and came back and took the faceplate off. I'll probably just end up using this technique in the future because this seems like it's a lot easier to do if you just attach the faceplate. No idea why I wasn't doing that sooner. So here we are, got it reversed on the chuck, and now we're just getting everything nice and even and flat, and then we're going to start our gouging portion of it here in just a little bit. But getting everything nice and even, and then you can see the ribbons and everything hitting the camera, and I'm just praying not to get any chip out from the lip of the bowl because that part always freaks me the hell out. So this part, now we're just starting the gouging portion of it, which went relatively smooth. I knew that, we haven't worked with epoxy in a while, and it's kind of like riding a bike. Even though you do epoxy projects that might have wood and stuff in it, it always feels different on the chisels. So this part, not a whole lot of issues. Just went between my round carbide tools, my medium and large size carbide, and we're just gouging this out to a nice depth that we want. Not a whole lot of issues here from what I can remember. And then just a little bit different view. Came out really, really good at this part. You can see the ribbons that are on the workbench there, and a little bit of slow motion. So haven't used this technique in a little bit, but you can see just the good ribbon flow that we're getting off of the gouging there. It's just spitting out of the bowl itself, and this looks really cool. I think this angle is a little bit different, so kind of like this part, and we're getting to a nice depth, so we're taking off a lot of good quality material. And when you're getting shavings like that, you know that you're doing it right. So that's something to look out for. That Spider-Man just shooting out kind of technique. But went back and forth, just gouging it out. We got like a bird's nest over here by the lathe, so really happy how this is turning out. And we're just getting to a nice depth and trying to avoid chip out as much as humanly possible. But once we got to this part, not a whole lot of problems. Like I said, this was relatively easy, and then we're just taking small, shallow strokes, making sure everything is nice and even. and we're just doing some finer follow-up work here. And I've learned to avoid my square carbide tool for the most part when doing some of these all epoxy projects. I used to be really all about the square carbide tool, but I learned just use the round carbide tools. They're a lot easier, and then just come back and scrape out the edges instead of trying to square everything up. That tends to be a little bit easier. But we're nearly done with the gouging portion here. You can see all the shavings. Everything's nice and neat. Throw those on there. Just a mess. One bowl created this entire mess. So stuff everywhere. So now we're going to do my favorite part, which is sanding. Because God knows I love sanding. I really don't. But I started this part of it really early in the morning. So we went from 340 up to 1500 of dry sanding, then came back, hit it with the wet sanding, and just getting everything polished up. Haven't done any polishing in a long time, so this part went relatively smooth. Then we came back, hit it with the wood wax. Really like how this turned out. I love how this looks. Like I said, haven't done an all epoxy project, but you can see like the starry kind of effect that comes with this once we got everything nice and polished. So if you have leftover resin, it is still good. You just might have to accumulate a little bit of it before you can really do anything with it. So 48 ounces of resin didn't go to waste. We still got a cool bowl out of it. In spite of all of the problems that we had, it still turned out really cool. So we had chip out, we had the blank detached from the lathe, we had all those issues, but we figured them out. Experience is the best teacher, so even in failure, you learn a lot from that. But cool sparkle green type of effect. Really like how this turned out. Can't say enough things about it. Looks really cool. Still worked the problem, but hope you guys liked it. Hope you got something out of it. You guys are probably watching this sometime in September, so don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good junk that every YouTuber says, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace. Alright, so project is done, and this is a cool looking green epoxy flake glitter bowl. So, you guys saw all the problems that we had with getting the faceplate on there, and we haven't done a just pure epoxy project on the channel in a couple of weeks. So, getting used to shaping and doing all that with this one was kind of a learning process. The gouging went pretty smooth. It's just getting everything into a cylindrical shape that was kind of the issue. And then obviously saw the blank fly off the lathe. Haven't had that happen in a long time, but overall really happy how this looks. This looks really, really cool. It's super duper smooth. Not a whole lot of ripples on it, which is good. But the epoxy set up really well. And I think the reason why I had a bit of a problem in the early part of it, as far as the just getting everything smoothed out, is because it was different epoxies, and they set up and they react different to the heat, yada yada yada. But overall, really happy how this turned out. Stuck with it, kept my composure, didn't get too frustrated. Old me 4 years ago would have already have thrown this, and not that I didn't do that with another project a couple of weeks ago, but really happy how this turned out. It's green, it looks cool, just something to do with some leftover epoxy, but really happy how this looks right now. But today is the 4th of September. I'm starting to stack these projects back a little bit, so you guys are watching this in a couple of weeks probably, so don't know how I'm going to put that out. But overall, really happy how this turned out. Things are going well, and it's now 88 degrees inside of the garage, or inside of the workshop. I started this around 8 o'clock, took about 3.5 hours to finish from start to finish, cleaned up the shop and everything. So I'm going to go inside, cool off, and get some water. So hope you guys liked it, hope you got something out of it, hope everybody's having a good day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, peace.